Welcome to the channel. My name is Matthias. Today we're back working with Francis Fukuyama, and we're going to dive in head first into his book Identity, the Demand for Dignity and the Politics of Resentment that he published way back in 2018. So the really interesting thing about this book is that it sort of starts in the same way that Richard Haas's book World in Disarray, where we have both writers analyzing the post-Cold War order that we had and how this order had brought sufficient stability that over the past 20 years, most of the world's economies had grown and most of the demographic indicators hadn't gotten much better in general. Now, for Francis Fukuyama, this post-Cold War order gave us the liberal democratic world order, where in the early 2000s, basically the liberal democracy became the default government across the world. And he mentions at least an aspiration. But the thing is, as I mentioned previously, most of the demographic indicators across the board in all these countries were in a much better place. But this liberal world order entered in crisis in the early 2010s because, in Francis's words, all this prosperity ended up being concentrated in the higher echelons of each one of these societies. And this led to more inequality in developed countries and in developing countries. One of the main pillars of this liberal democratic world is the increased movement of goods, money, and people from one place to another, causing major disruptive social changes across international borders and within the countries themselves. But this causes a great deal of disruptive social change. This massive disruptive change, on one hand, benefited this order, but at the same time sort of planted the seeds to problems and conflicts that we're going to see further down the line. Another huge thing that took place during this time and also would plant the seeds to a crisis in this order is the birth of gigantic middle classes in China, in India, basically replacing the work to traditional industrial areas, be it Europe and the United States. Also, outside of all this migratory movement that had a profound impact on labor markets, we have two key things that take place. First, we have women replacing men in many key areas within the labor market and dominating the service sector. And on the other hand, we have many low-skilled jobs being replaced by machines. All these things that I mentioned, on one hand, created prosperity, but on the other hand, provoked a rise in unemployment and the fall of incomes, or at least the stagnation of them. Feeding into this whole situation and making it worse, we had two major economic crises in 2008 in the United States and later on the Greek crash, where we had the populations of the countries most affected by these economic crises that the elites had failed them. So there was this perception that these liberal policies made just the richer richer and the poor more poor. And this would open the door and give political capital to a new generation of anti-liberal authoritarian politicians. And many of these politicians would rise to power. And in this book, Francis Fukuyama puts his focus on the rise of these right-wing politicians to explain the rise of Trump and the growing assertiveness of Russia and China. So I'm going to leave this video here. I hope you guys liked it. See you guys next time. Bye.